Selena Quintanilla grossed a reported $5 million in the final 2 years of her life. She sold out the Houston Astrodome in a concert broadcast live on Univision. She had a record deal with EMI Latin, a clothing line, 2 boutiques with full salons, and a Coca-Cola contract. And when the probate court finally counted what she and her husband actually held, the number came to roughly $326,000. That gap is not a rounding error. That gap is the reason she died, because the woman who managed her money had been quietly living inside it for years. And on the last morning of March, 1995, Selena drove to a Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi to take her own paperwork back. Paperwork the IRS was going to need in 2 weeks. This story has 4 rooms, and we are going to walk through them in order. First, the machine. How a family band from Texas turned a daughter into a $5 million business. Second, the insider. The fan who talked her way into the books. Third, the deadline. The 3 weeks of tax season that ended in room 158. And fourth, the room almost nobody opens. The empire she never saw a dollar of. The machine started with a failure. Abraham Quintanilla had been a musician in the 60s, then a restaurant owner in Lake Jackson, Texas, until the oil recession of the early 80s took the restaurant and most of what the family had. What remained was a garage, some instruments, and a 9-year-old daughter with a voice that stopped people mid-sentence. Abraham built a band around her, Selena y los Dinos, with her brother on bass and her sister on drums, and put them all on a battered tour bus the family called Big Bertha. They played weddings, county fairs, and half-empty dance halls across South Texas. Some nights they were paid in cash. Some nights, per the family accounts, they were paid in food. But Abraham ran the band like a company, and the company compounded. In 1989, EMI Latin signed Selena as the very first artist on the new label, a 6-figure deal by the reported accounts. That same year, a Coca-Cola executive saw her at the Tejano Music Awards, and the company signed the teenager as a spokesperson. The bookings grew from dance halls to arenas. In 1994, she won the Grammy for Best Mexican-American Album. And in February of 1995, she walked onto the floor of the Houston Astrodome in a purple jumpsuit and sang for more than 61,000 people, the largest crowd of her life, at the same rodeo where she had been an opening act just a few years earlier. Hispanic Business Magazine put her among the richest Latino entertainers in America, with reported earnings of about $5 million across her final 2 years. Here is the detail that matters for everything that follows. Very little of that money sat in her own name. The income ran through the family operation, Q Productions Inc., and Selena drew from it rather than owning it outright. She understood the difference, and it bothered her enough that she was studying business administration by correspondence while touring, determined to read her own balance sheets one day. She was building toward the moment she could see every number herself. She never got there. That is the machine. Room 1 of 4. Now meet the person the family let inside it. In 1991, a registered nurse from San Antonio named Yolanda Saldivar started calling Abraham Quintanilla. She wanted to run an official Selena fan club. She was persistent, she was organized, and she had a degree, which impressed Selena. What the family did not know, and what Abraham would only dig up 4 years later, was that Saldivar had reportedly tried the same pitch on the family of another Tejano singer, Shelly Lares, and had been turned away. The Quintanillas said yes. The fan club charged $22 a year. In return, members were promised a t-shirt, a CD, and a biography of the singer. Membership climbed past 5,000 people, and some accounts put it near 8,000 at the peak. Run the numbers, and you get a six-figure stream of small checks from teenagers and working families, flowing year after year into an account that Saldivar controlled. Nobody was watching it, because the club looked like Devotion, and Devotion is the last place a business thinks to audit. Saldivar quit nursing to work for Selena full-time, and in 1994, she was promoted again, this time to manage Selena, etc., the fashion company Selena had built as her declaration of independence. 2 boutiques with full-service salons, one on Everhart Road in Corpus Christi, and one on Broadway in San Antonio, selling clothes Selena designed with the fashion designer Martin Gomez. It was the one business that was hers, her idea, her name over the door. Under Saldivar, it began to rot from the inside. Gomez quit, saying he could not work with her. Staff kept leaving or getting fired, and the reported headcount shrank from 38 employees to 14 in a matter of months. Suppliers went unpaid, while the manager told everyone things were fine. Then, in January of 1995, the phone calls started. Fans who had paid their $22 and received nothing. Then boutique vendors chasing invoices. Abraham started pulling records, and what he found, per the trial testimony and the appeals court record, read like a manual of small-scale fraud. Checks drawn on the businesses, made payable to Yolanda Saldivar, signed by Yolanda Saldivar, and deposited into accounts controlled by Yolanda Saldivar at Bank One of San Antonio, checks she had signed as the person holding fiduciary duty over those accounts. A fan club bank account that had been opened not in her own name, but under the name of her sister. And when Abraham dug into her past, he found the 1983 lawsuit in which a San Antonio dermatologist, her former employer, accused her of stealing a reported $9,200 from his practice. That case had been settled quietly out of court. The pattern was more than a decade old before it ever reached Selena. One object tells the whole scheme in miniature. In early 1995, Saldivar collected cash from the boutique employees for a group gift, a 14-karat gold ring topped with a white gold egg, made by a Corpus Christi jeweler for about $3,000, because Selena collected egg-shaped ornaments. Per the widely reported accounts, Saldivar then paid for the ring with Selena's own company credit card and presented it as a token of friendship. Selena wore it every day. She was, in the most literal sense, wearing the theft. So how much did Saldivar actually take? Pick your source. Abraham's early figure was $30,000. The press record most commonly says more than $60,000. And years later, per Univision reporting, Saldivar herself put the number at nearly $200,000 when explaining her own motive. Here is the strangest fact in the whole case. No court ever settled that question, because the embezzlement file was still waiting on a grand jury when the murder conviction made it irrelevant. The theft at the center of everything was never adjudicated. Remember that when we get to the final room. But a theft only becomes a murder when the thief runs out of room. Halfway through the story now, and in March of 1995, the calendar itself started closing in. This is the deadline. On March 9th, Abraham called Saldivar into the Q Productions office in Corpus Christi and sat her down across from Selena and her sister Suzette. He laid the forged checks and the Bank One letter on the table and asked her to explain. Per the testimony, she stared at him and offered nothing except a promise that the right paperwork would clear it all up. The next day, Selena removed her as a signer on the business accounts and replaced her as head of the fan club. The professional relationship was over. The financial one was not, and this is the mechanism the true crime videos flatten. April 15th was coming. Tax filing day. The IRS required Selena's accountant to have the bank statements, the receipts, and the records of 2 businesses. And nearly all of that paper sat in the hands of the one person she had just cut off. There were also loose ends in Monterrey, where Selena had been planning a factory to manufacture her designs for the Mexican market. So Selena kept meeting the woman who had been stealing from her, not out of softness, but because Saldivar was holding her paperwork hostage, and the federal deadline did not care whose feelings were hurt. Every stalled handover bought the thief another day. Saldivar spent those days differently. On March 11th, she walked into a San Antonio gun shop called A Place to Shoot and bought a .38 caliber Taurus revolver and 5 hollow point rounds, telling the staff she was a nurse whose patient's relatives had threatened her. Days later, she returned it. Then, in the last week of March, on the 26th or 27th, depending on the account, she bought the same revolver back. On the night of March 30th, close to midnight, Selena and her husband Chris Perez drove to the Days Inn near the Corpus Christi airport, where Saldivar was staying. They collected a folder of documents and went home. Sorting through it, Selena realized the most important records, the bank statements she needed for the IRS, were still missing. The next morning, she went back alone. Saldivar had a new delay ready. She claimed she had been raped and beaten in Mexico, and Selena, who could not simply abandon a sobbing woman whatever she had done, drove her to Doctors Regional Hospital. The examination found no evidence supporting the story, and per the testimony, her account kept shifting under the doctor's questions. By late morning, the two women were back in room 158 of the Days Inn, and Selena was done. She demanded the records. Per the trial record, she told Saldivar the friendship was finished, and she pulled the egg ring off her finger to hand it back. As she turned for the door, Saldivar raised the revolver and fired a single hollow point round into her back, severing the artery beneath her collarbone. Selena ran nearly 400 feet to the motel lobby before she collapsed. She gave the front desk a name and a room number, Yolanda, room 158, and those were her last words. She was pronounced dead at 5 minutes past 1 that afternoon, 16 days before her 24th birthday, and about 2 weeks before the IRS deadline that had forced every one of those meetings. In the ambulance, a paramedic opened her clenched right hand. The ring fell out, bought with her own money, given to her as a gift, held as she died, and logged into evidence wrapped in bloody gauze. Abraham reportedly later threw it into the waters off Corpus Christi. Saldivar sat in her pickup truck outside the motel for 9.5 hours, with the gun to her own head, before surrendering. That October, a Houston jury took barely 2 hours to convict her of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life with a first shot at parole after 30 years. The trial answered who? It never answered the money. Last room now, and this is the part the murder documentaries skip, which is exactly why we made this video. Selena died without a will. Under the Texas Estates Code, when someone dies intestate, their estate passes through probate, and the assets are distributed according to state law rather than the deceased's wishes. When her estate went through that process, the filings showed roughly $326,000 in joint assets with Chris Perez, and one reported accounting put her individual probated estate as low as $164,000. A $5 million career and barely a used luxury car's worth of it in her own hands, because the money had always lived inside the family structure rather than with her. 2 years after her death, the IRS came calling too, alleging her income had been underreported by more than $1 million, a dispute the family reportedly settled for about $590,000. And then the empire she never saw began to build itself on top of her. Dreaming of You, the crossover album she was recording when she died, sold 175,000 copies on its first day that July, a record at the time for a female artist. and became the first mostly Spanish-language album ever to debut at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart. The Warner Brothers film 2 years later turned a $20 million budget into $35 million at the box office and made Jennifer Lopez reportedly the first Latina actress paid $1 million for a role. In 2016, MAC Cosmetics released a Selena makeup collection that reportedly became the best-selling celebrity collaboration in the company's history, selling out online within minutes, with resale bids climbing past $3,000. More than the ring cost. Netflix built a scripted series about her in 2020, and in November of 2025, it released the family's own documentary, Selena y los Dinos, in a deal reported by Deadline at $6 to $7 million. So who collects? Weeks after her death, Chris Perez, grieving and without his own lawyer, signed an agreement drafted for Abraham that gave the family full control of Selena's name and likeness, and left her husband a 25% share of net profits. Decades later, when Perez tried to turn his memoir into a television series, Abraham sued him, and that lawsuit produced the hardest numbers in this entire story. Per the court filing reported by Billboard, Perez's quarter share came to $15,400 in his worst year and $167,000 in his best, roughly $3 million across 25 years. Scale that up from 25%, and the entire Selena estate declared a net profit of only about $12 million between her death and 2020. A #1 album, a Hollywood film, a museum, the best-selling MAC collection ever, and on paper, $12 million across a quarter century. The agreement allows broad deductions for salaries, production, marketing, and legal fees, and the public filings never itemize where the difference between the cultural empire and the declared profit actually lives. And Yolanda Saldivar, per the available record, she has never earned $1 from any of it. There is no book. When she appeared in a 2024 television docuseries denying the embezzlement and claiming she had been covering for secrets in Selena's life, she offered no evidence, and no reporting has established that she was paid. Texas Civil Practice and Remedies Code. Chapter 96, the state's Son of Sam Law, is designed to seize a convicted killer's profits from telling the story, though its enforceability has been in doubt since the Supreme Court struck down a similar law decades ago. In her case, there has simply been nothing to seize. In March of 2025, 30 years almost to the day after the shooting, a Texas parole panel denied her release, citing the brutality of the offense. Her next review comes in 2030, when she will be around 70 years old. So step back and look at the ledger one last time. Selena Quintanilla died fighting to recover her own bank statements from the IRS deadline, 16 days before her birthday and 2 weeks before April 15th, holding a $3,000 ring that her own money had paid for. The woman who killed her over a 5-figure theft has spent 30 years in a cell and never made a cent. The family she built the machine with controls an empire that looks smaller on paper than it feels in the culture. And the artist at the center of all of it collected almost none of what her name would go on to earn. The most dangerous line in any business is not the revenue. It is the signature card, the short list of names that says who can touch the money. Selena handed that fiduciary power to one person and never audited the trust. So we will leave you with the question her story forces. If you built a $5 million business, is there anyone you would hand every bank statement to, no questions asked? Tell us who in the comments, and be honest. And if you want to see how the same quiet leak drained $250 million from Whitney Houston, that video is on your screen right now.